Good morning, it is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number, if you want to be a part of the show, we actually have phones today. If you weren't here yesterday, a drunk driver took out power near the remote studio the call screener was in, and we had no power to operate phones. We do today. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. And we have news about guns this morning. The President Trump, according to the New York Times and the Washington Post, both reporting President Trump appears to be backing away from potential support for gun background check legislation, according to White House aides, congressional leaders, and gun advocates, dimming prospects that Washington will approve significant new gun measures in the wake of mass shootings that left 31 dead. Immediately after the carnage in El Paso and Dayton, Ohio, Trump said there is a great appetite for tightening background checks on people who buy firearms, but in recent days, Trump has focused in public remarks on the need to keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill, while emphasizing the nation already has very strong background checks right now, positions that hew more closely to the views of the National Rifle Association. Behind the scenes, Trump's communication with key lawmakers, including Senator Joe Manchin, a moderate Democrat from West Virginia, who has sought to develop a bipartisan gun control measure, has gone mostly cold, according to Capitol Hill aides, in part because Congress has left town for the summer. Now, here's what I know. I've talked to a number of people within the White House who are longtime friends of mine on this issue, and they say that the president does, when he talks about background checks, what he's actually been focusing on is how to beef up the background check. There was a story I mentioned last week where in North Carolina, it turns out there were something like 280,000 felonies that had not been entered into the National Criminal Background Check database. When you run an instant background check, it goes what is NCIS system. And something like 70 to 80 people in North Carolina were prohibited from buying guns because their information was finally put into the database. You had that situation with Sutherland Springs, Texas, where the shooter went into the church and began killing people. And he should not have been able to buy a gun because of his background, but the data that would have prohibited from buying a gun had not been put into the database. And the reason is because there isn't enough funding, so there isn't enough manpower to put in the information. The information isn't standardized. It's more difficult to put stuff in. There's information some states would like to put in, and Congress is considering more domestic violence information into the database. These things can be cleaned up and improve the database. But I want to read you again this second paragraph from the story. I believe this is from the New York Times. Immediately after the carnage in Washington Post. I'm sorry, David Nakamura from the Washington Post. Immediately after the carnage in El Paso and Dayton, Ohio, Trump said there is a great appetite for tightening background checks on people who buy firearms. But in recent days, Trump has focused in public remarks on the need to keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill, while emphasizing that the nation already has very strong background checks right now, positions that hew more closely to the views of the National Rifle Association. I am told very, very, very reliably at the highest levels of the White House that the National Rifle Association is nowhere to be seen on this issue. I want you to let that sink in for a minute. According to very high up sources in the White House, the National Rifle Association is nowhere to be seen on this issue. The media continues to blame the NRA for all of these things. The Democrats continue to blame the NRA for all these things. You get on debate stages with the Democrats, and the NRA is their boogeyman. Here's John Legend. Last week, John Legend, the singer, out there parroting what the Democrats say.
The NRA claims to represent gun owners, but they really represent gun manufacturers, people who make money off of selling guns. So they want us to believe that the way we solve this problem is to arm people even more. More people need guns. Teachers need guns. We need guns everywhere. Everybody's got to have a gun to protect each other from everyone else's guns. But we're just escalating the violence, escalating the fact that we're armed to the teeth, and we're not making anybody safer.
Yeah, right. He gets a lot wrong there. You know why the NRA has been so effective in the past is that it represents gun owners, not gun manufacturers. And in a nation of 350 million people, we have 400 million guns. there are a lot of people who support the Second Amendment, a whole lot of people who support the Second Amendment in the United States. And some of them are okay with reasonable gun control measures. They call reasonable increased background checks, prohibiting gun shows, things like that, which I don't find reasonable at all, but they do. But the NRA has tended to represent them. It has been a civil rights organization. In the past few years, though, it seems to have taken a return to partisanship. And that's made a number of people mad. And now all of these lawsuits and back and forth with its, the McQueen, what is it? Not Alexander McQueen. The advertising agency the NRA was working with NRA TV and the like. They've got a very, very nasty fight now. And now you're starting to see people blasting the NRA. I am one of them. I've become very critical of where the NRA is going. And the fact that there are senior people in the White House telling me the NRA is nowhere to be seen on this issue, is nowhere to be seen helping them, is very troubling. Here is audio from Fox News from last night. Listen to this.
He made NRA members pay for a trip to Italy and Budapest in 2014, including $6,500 at the Four Seasons Hotel. I've been to that hotel. It's lovely. But Mr. LaPierre, there are other countries and other hotels you can stay at if you want to protect the Second Amendment. Try the Hyatt in Washington, D.C. It's a short walk to places like the United States Congress and the Supreme Court, where Americans' gun rights are actually decided, not Budapest or even Lake Como, where you billed NRA members $2,400 for a stay at this luxury retreat, the Casa Diva Resort. Not to mention $17,550 for an air charter, also known as a private jet, to get you from one to the other. Oh, and $18,300 for a car and driver at each end. Now, we reached out to the NRA for comments on all of this last week, and instead we got a letter from their lawyers. Among other things, they provided us with a statement from the NRA about Mr. LaPierre's lavish clothing expenses, saying, quote, over the years, Wayne had been advised by the NRA's external advertising professionals to invest in his professional wardrobe due to his numerous public and media appearances. $250,000, that is some investment. And all that extravagant travel, well, the NRA says all of it, quote, involved donor outreach, fundraising and stakeholder engagement, because there sure are a lot of NRA donors and stakeholders in Budapest and Lake Como. Oh, and that $5+ million house, they were adamant that no NRA money was ultimately spent. Well, yeah, that's because the deal fell through, like we said. For years, Wayne LaPierre has taken NRA members' money to live the life of a king. But he's not a king. He's the head of a non-profit trusted by millions to use its funds to secure constitutional rights. Wayne LaPierre is an odious little grifter, and it's time for him to go.
That's Fox News, folks. That is a Fox News host. What's his name? Stephen. Oh gosh, I accidentally deleted it from my notes. Hang on, I want to make sure you have the exact name of the host who's blasting LaPierre. It is Steve Hilton on the NRA. On Wayne LaPierre, an odious little grifter. And it's time for him to go. And this is being echoed by more and more people on the right, that the NRA, whether it's LaPierre or others, that it's probably time for him to go. And again, I want to tell you, I am talking to senior people in the White House who tell me the NRA hasn't really done much on this issue. Now, thankfully, for those of us who support the Second Amendment, many Republican members of Congress are talking to the president. And they are making it clear to the president that he can't go down the road of these requiring individual sellers to have background checks. So none of the guns, to my knowledge, the guns that have been used in any of these shootings, and I could be wrong, so please don't hold me to it, and please send me data if you have it so that I know. But I'm not aware of any individual transactions. Meaning that it's an arm's length transaction between two individuals with these guns, that it is these people going to gun stores where you do a background check. What the Democrats want to do is to say that if you're an individual and you own a gun and you want to sell it to your next door neighbor, that you should be required to have to go through the background checks, or the two of you should have to go to a gun store You sell it to the gun store who does a background check on the other individual and then resells it to them, or you have a pass-through transaction through a gun store. That's one of the compromises being floated is instead of you having to fill out the paperwork, you know, when you go to a gun store, for those of you who don't know, I saw one of the Parkland gun activists who was there was at school that day, and he was saying that it's easier to buy an AR-15 than it is to buy cold medicine, which isn't true at all. And he's clearly never tried to buy a gun if he thinks that's true. But there is this perception that it's really super easy to buy a gun, and it's not. One, they're expensive, and two, when you go in, you have to fill out paperwork, and that paperwork requires you to answer a bunch of questions, show your driver's license. If you got a concealed carry permit, that makes it more helpful. You fill out that information, and then they have to they got to put it into a federal database. They got to put your social security number in, other things, and they get an instant background check. And it is pretty quick, but it's not that quick. And it takes some time to fill out the paperwork, and they do gotcha questions. So, have you ever smoked marijuana? Have you ever used drugs? Have you ever been convicted of a felony? You check no on all these things, and then it turns out, oh, yeah, actually you had. They come back and they throw you in jail for lying on that form for those questions. Now, never mind about your legal right to buy the firearm. You have misrepresented yourself on the form, and that's a felony. So there are all sorts of ways they try to get you in jail if you screwed up this form. You have to go through the background check, and then you can get the firearm, but you can get it that day. Some of the compromises that the left has proposed to slow this process down is there's a 3-day waiting period between your acceptance through the background check and actually being able to pick up the gun. Another compromise is that if there is an arm's length transaction between two people, what you have to do is go to a gun store, have the person you want to sell the gun to for a fee fill out the background check information, and then you can, once the gun store processes it, then you can sell the gun to the individual, and I'm sure the gun store will charge you through the nose for doing the background check. There are all sorts of compromises floated by the left, but here's the ultimate issue. We have the Second Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms is a constitutional right. You may not like it. You may wish it wasn't there, but it is. In fact, it's actually in the Constitution. The abortion right was interpreted through the interpretation of a privacy right that also isn't in the Constitution. It's 2 steps removed from the Constitution, and the Second Amendment's right there written into it. If you don't like this, you need to repeal the Second Amendment. And so much of the rhetoric from the left around gun confiscations, mandatory buybacks, prohibitions on guns, red flag laws where you can get your guns taken away from you and have to go to court to get them back, they're all done as if the Second Amendment isn't a right within the Constitution. If they're going to try to figure out a way to deal with the problem, they need to figure out a way to deal with the Second Amendment, either repeal it or work through it. And one of the ways you could work through it is you do have to go through the background check, beef up the database, fund the database, allow gun violence restraining orders. Not red flag laws where you can go in and preemptively take someone's gun, but a gun violence restraining order where you can go in and say, I think this person's going to do something, and they go and bring that person to a hearing and see. And then they have a due process hearing. And then if they decide the person's a threat, they take the person's guns away. You can't take someone's guns away before you have a due process hearing because it's a constitutional right. There are ways we do things, but here's ultimately the problem. We had Sandy Hook. We had Columbine happen after the assault weapons ban. We've had the Parkland shooting. We've had all of these other shootings. Are we now suddenly going to do something? See, the Democrats had the White House and Congress for 2 whole years where they could have done something, and they decided to do health care instead. They didn't handle immigration. They didn't handle guns. They didn't do any of that. They decided to handle health care. The Democrats really like this issue. They think it helps them in the suburbs. I'm just not convinced that they actually want to do anything about the issue when they can keep the issue. Much like immigration, they want to keep the issue festering and use it for political capital without actually solving it. And frankly, I think sometimes the right wants to do that with the life issue. The president made big gains yesterday on that with Planned Parenthood. I've got the details on that when we come back, and also some troubling economic news you need to prepare for when we come back right here on the Erick Erickson Show. And that's where I'm supposed to fire the sounder so we can go to break, aren't we?
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now at 877-973.
It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, well, give me just a couple of minutes on the phones before you call in. The call screener had to take his kid to daycare. So we'll get this. And he can't listen to the show right now. So I can tell you he had to take his child to daycare. So he'll be back momentarily. Oh, listen, I totally understand. So I've got a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. We actually had a situation this morning. My wife is on some medicine for her cancer, and it gives her these weird side effects. And it's not technically an oral chemo. I guess you could call it an oral chemo. Essentially, she has a genetic form of lung cancer that there's no cure for it, but they can keep it from growing in her lungs. And to do so, she takes a pill. The cancer essentially it grows from a protein, and the pill keeps the protein from replicating in her body, so the cancer tumors can't feed off of it and grow. But it causes really weird side effects, and occasionally those side effects are upset stomach. And I'm doing my show prep this morning, and the kids are in the car waiting to go to school, and she's telling me I'm going to have to take the kids to school, so I'm running to get ready to take the kids to school, and then she's fine. And life comes at you sometimes. Life comes at you. Let me just real quick. Big victory for pro-lifers. So the two things they tell you never to talk about in radio are guns and abortion. And my first topic was guns. And real quick, Planned Parenthood is going to refuse Title X funding rather than comply with the Trump administration's restrictions governing the discussion of abortion at clinics that participate in the program. This is from Jack Crow at National Review. Planned Parenthood decided to abandon Title X, which accounts for roughly 15% of its overall federal funding each year, in response to a Trump administration rule barring clinics from participation in the program from referring women to abortion providers. Planned Parenthood is blowing this up. I got to read you the take from the New York Times, though. The take from the New York Times is precious, and I really mean it's precious. How the New York Times does this. The story is from Pam Bellick. Planned Parenthood said Monday it would withdraw from the federal family planning program that provides birth control and other health services to poor women rather than comply with a new Trump administration rule that forbids referrals to doctors who can perform abortions. Planned Parenthood receives about $60 million annually through Title X. The funds have enabled the group to provide more than 1.5 million low-income women each year with services like birth control, pregnancy tests, as well as screenings for sexually transmitted diseases and breast and cervical cancer. In some rural communities, Planned Parenthood is the only provider doing these services. Y'all, Planned Parenthood staff have themselves admitted that Planned Parenthood doesn't do a lot of these things. In many Planned Parenthood services, they will refer you somewhere else for a mammogram. They don't actually do them in-house. This is mythology on the left that is treated as fact by the New York Times, when in fact Planned Parenthood's own people have admitted it doesn't do these things. In fact, you'll recall Planned Parenthood just ousted the head of Planned Parenthood because she wanted to do these things, and Planned Parenthood is committed to murdering children on the altar of Moloch. I mean, they are the high priests of the secular religion. Abortion is a sacrament on the left these days. And Donald Trump has just smited their gods. This is actually a really big win for the pro-life community. Let me tell you, I am deeply critical of the president at times, and I think deservedly so, and I get blowback from some of my friends. But I know a lot of people who did not vote for the president in 2016 because they did not believe he was pro-life. They looked at his life, they looked at his background, they looked at you got to remember, during the general election in 2016, the president was saying Planned Parenthood did good things. He had some of his preachers out there who love him, the Trump-pumping pastors out there, defending his defense of Planned Parenthood. And it turns out the president has struck a blow for life that other Republican presidents haven't done. And these conservatives who sat on the sidelines in 2016, they didn't vote for Hillary either. They thought there were two pro-abortion candidates in the race, and they didn't want to vote for either one, so they stayed home. They're realizing, you know what? The president, turns out, he's deeply pro-life, or at least he's been able to make huge gains. He, not the last Republican president, not the Republican Congress that planned to do it, that claimed they would do it, but he has defunded Planned Parenthood, depriving them of $60 million. When we come back, Joe Biden, he's on the warpath. He's headed for Donald Trump. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC. That's 877-973-7425. If you want to be a part of the program, Joe Biden launching his general election bid. Now, you should know, where is it? Hang on. I should have done this during commercial break and got distracted responding to some emails. CNN actually has some big polling out. Joe Biden, the CNN polling, the Fox News polling, all very consistent. The president not doing well at all against Joe Biden, and Biden himself has rebounded into the lead. Let me give you the metrics here on where they all shake out. According to CNN, in October of 2018, it was Biden 33, Sanders 14, Elizabeth Warren 9, Kamala Harris 10, Beto O'Rourke at 7. In December of 2018, it was Biden 33, Bernie Sanders 14, Elizabeth Warren 4, Kamala Harris 4, Beto O'Rourke 9. In March of 2019, it was Biden 28, Sanders 19, Warren 7, Kamala Harris 12, Beto O'Rourke 13. Well, where do things shake out now? It is, let's see, Democratic leading independents. You've got Elizabeth Warren at 20. That's not the right one. See, this is why I should have done it before the break. Yeah, okay, here we go. Yes. Right now, how does it shake out? This is August. It shakes out Biden at 29, Sanders at 15, Warren at 14, Buttigieg at 5, Kamala Harris at 5, and Beto O'Rourke at 3. Now, to give this to you again, this is the tracking poll for the first question. Let me read you the question so you have an understanding of how this polling works for CNN. This, again, CNN SSRS poll. I'm going to read a list of people who may be running in the Democratic primaries for president in 2020. After I read all the names, please tell me which of those candidates you would most likely support for the Democratic nomination for president, or if you would support someone else. Pity the fool who had to sit through all of these names. But let me read you where we have the lay of the land. Again, in October of 2018, you had Biden at 13, Sanders at 14, Warren at 9, Buttigieg at 0, Kamala Harris at 10, Beto O'Rourke at 7, Cory Booker at 5. Where does it shape up now? You've got Biden at 29, roughly holding steady within the margin of error. Bernie Sanders at 15, holding steady in the margin of error. Elizabeth Warren at 14%. She's actually gained significantly. Pete Buttigieg at 5. He's gained significantly. Kamala Harris, who has declined precipitously. Beto O'Rourke at 3. He's declined. And Tulsi Gabbard now at 2%. Where is Cory Booker? Cory Booker's at 2% as well. What's so striking here is, one, the surge of Tulsi Gabbard from nothing. She was at nothing in the polls in October, December, March, and the like. And now suddenly she is up in the polls, pulsing enough to get on a debate stage. But you got Joe Biden holding very steady. Joe Biden, let me give you the breakdown here for Joe Biden, which makes it very fascinating. Joe Biden is at 29% with non-white voters. He's at 28% with white voters. He's at 27% with women. He's at 31% with men. Bernie Sanders, interestingly enough, does better with women than with men, but statistically insignificant. Pete Buttigieg does better with women than men. But among non-white voters, Buttigieg is at 3%, and that's not a lot of Hispanic voters, or not a lot of black voters with Buttigieg. Now, Biden himself is going into general election mode. I want to play for you Joe Biden releasing a new ad today The ad title is called Bones. This is a 1-minute ad. It is designed for TV. It's released first on YouTube. Let me rearrange my sound package here so I can run this through the router so you guys can hear it off my computer. Joe Biden for president. The name for this ad is Bones. The description for the ad is, we all know in our bones that this election is different. The stakes are higher. The threat is more serious. We have to beat Donald Trump. Listen to this ad.
We know in our bones this election is different. The stakes are higher, the threat more serious. We have to beat Donald Trump. And all the polls agree Joe Biden is the strongest Democrat to do the job. No one is more qualified. For 8 years, President Obama and Vice President Biden were an administration America could be proud of. Our allies could trust and our kids could look up to. Together, they worked to save the American economy, to pass the historic Affordable Care Act, protecting over 100 million Americans with pre-existing conditions. Now, Joe Biden is running for president with a plan for America's future. To build on Obamacare, not scrap it. To make a record investment in America's schools. To lead the world on climate. To rebuild our alliances. Most of all, he'll restore the soul of the nation. Battered by an erratic, vicious, bullying president. Strong, steady, stable leadership. Biden, president.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
We know.
Now, let me talk you through this ad. First of all, the visuals. The visuals begin with the face of an older black
On
man
our bones, this
and then a younger Latino woman,
election is different.
an older white man,
The stakes are higher.
and then scenes from the Charlottesville protest with the Proud Boys and Antifa beating each
The
other.
threat more serious.
And then a scene of those white nationalists marching with tiki torches down the steps in Charlottesville, Virginia, yelling.
We have to beat Donald Trump.
And then there's Donald Trump. And then there's this. It is a screenshot of polling from the Quinnipiac poll in June and the Wall Street Journal NBC poll in July, showing that Biden beats Trump by 13 points in Quinnipiac, 9 points
the
in the
polls
Wall
agree.
Street Journal, and then shows the end of July polling that has the IBD tip poll showing a 13-point lead, and then the Fox News poll showing Biden with a 12-point lead. That screenshot right there is the screenshot for the Democratic primary. Joe Biden has a double-digit lead over the rest of the Democrats because the Democrats want someone to beat Donald Trump. They do not want a progressive hero. They want someone who can beat Donald Trump. And what's so amazing to me are vocally the number of Democrats out there who are growing more and more vicious against Joe Biden on the presumption he can't win. And it's not about Joe Biden not being able to win. It's about these Democratic supporters knowing they're not going to get their agenda if Joe Biden wins, because they know institutionally Joe Biden is not with them on a lot of issues, that he's not the progressive warrior they want. He is not Elizabeth Warren. So much of the media is trying to make Elizabeth Warren happen. Elizabeth Warren is doing her best to make herself not happen. The hagiography of the media about Elizabeth Warren. Go back to October 14th of 2018. Elizabeth Warren released her DNA results that she was 1,024th Native American. You had the media. Time magazine ran a story that she was weaponizing transparency against Donald Trump. The Daily Beast ran a story that this was a genius move by Elizabeth Warren. You had reporters out there, including a reporter at NBC News, a political reporter, saying this reminded her of Barack Obama releasing his college transcripts. And it was actually a disaster for her. Within 24 hours, the headlines had shifted completely against her. What's so interesting are the number of reporters who deleted their pro-Elizabeth Warren tweets at the time, but they're starting to now praise her apology. Well, her apology is not actually going over so well. Elizabeth Warren spoke at a gathering of Native Americans, and listen to her still on the apology tour.
Now, before I go any further in this, I want to say this. Like anyone who's being honest with themselves, I know that I have made mistakes. I am sorry for harm I have caused. I have listened and I have learned a lot. And I am grateful for the many conversations that we've had together. It is a great honor to be able to partner with Indian country. And that's what I've tried to do as a senator. And that's what I promise I will do as President of the United States of America.
Indian country? I thought it was Native American. So why is she apologizing? I mean, according to the spin in the Boston Globe at the time, she was proving that she actually had Native American blood. She was proving she was real. Remember, Donald Trump said he would pay her $1 million to whichever charity if she proves she was Native American. She proves she's got 1,024th parts blood. And that somehow that made her Native American. And Trump laughed it off, or ridiculed her. The rest of the media ridiculed her. Well, and there's still some bad blood there, too. Listen to this. This is one of the participants at this summit where she was speaking of Native Americans.
Is Elizabeth Warren going to be a woman of color now?
She says she's not.
How can she say she's not when she just took a DNA test stating she is? So she's either one of us or she's not.
Ouch. 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 There just isn't a ton of love for Elizabeth Warren at this summit. And so let me give you some detail. Well, hang on. I've got one more clip for this. One of the things I have learned in my years of public speaking is never do a Jeb Bush. Please clap. One of the things you're never supposed to do as a speaker, particularly if you're the MC of an event. And when I was young and doing some of my first MCing events, it always grated on me when the host did it, so I never did it. And finally, one time I was actually I was MCing an event that was conducted by actual professionals in Washington, D.C. And one of the things the man told me to do is to make sure I never go on stage and do the good evening. And the crowd doesn't say much. You say, good evening. And the crowd doesn't say much. You say, good evening. And the crowd maybe then gets a hint that they're supposed to be loud, or the I can't hear you, that sort of thing, to make the crowd seem louder. What that is you're doing an admission up front that the crowd is not interested, and that's never a good thing. And you will understand when you hear this clip at this summit with Elizabeth Warren.
It's a wonderful day, and Native Americans across this country should celebrate a day today that we're sharing the stage with the future president, perhaps. I would expect more excitement from our native citizens.
Yeah, the big red flag. They're not excited by Elizabeth Warren. The people up front, you can hear on the microphone. The people in the back of they're not clapping. Why is this woman here? She claimed to be one of us, and now she's got to stand on stage and completely apologize to us. It doesn't go over well. What also doesn't go over well is Kamala Harris is out walking back Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All. She now says she's not actually, now that she's studied his plan, she's not actually a fan of his plan. Now, the problem here is that Kamala Harris is a sponsor of the Bernie Sanders plan. And in sponsoring the Bernie Sanders plan, she's defended the Bernie Sanders plan. She has stood on stage in praise of the Bernie Sanders plan. And now suddenly she says she's not a fan of the Bernie Sanders plan. How does that work exactly? She used to love the Medicare for All plan. I mean, she defended the Medicare for All plan. She was one of its champions. Again, she sponsored it.
But let's bring up Kamala Harris of California.
Thank you, Bernie. So I support Medicare for All. The reason that I am supporting Medicare for All is it's pretty basic. I believe that it's simply the moral and ethical thing to do. And let's be clear, it is not only about what is the right thing to do morally and ethically. It's also smart in terms of the fiscal impact. as we talk about moving toward a single-payer system, I think that there is certainly momentum and energy around that. And we should not differentiate in the way that we do public health policy. It's smart for us as taxpayers, and most importantly, it's just the right thing to do. Let's give the taxpayers of the United States a better return on their investment, which means Medicare for all. Americans are making, I think, very clear when they defeated the repeal of the ACA that they don't want us playing politics with their health care. And that is why I'm proud to stand with my colleagues and friends and support Medicare for all. Thank you.
And now she says she's not comfortable with the plan. Let me give you Kamala Harris's polling again in the polling from CNN. This is the historic polling. October of 2018, 10%. December of 2018, 4%. March of 2019, 12%. April of 2019, she's at 20 Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents who are registered to vote. She's at 20%. June, among Democrats, Democratic-leaning independents, registered voters, she's at 24%. Then she's at 20%. Now, that's somewhat different. I'm sorry. These are, who do you want to learn more about? Kamala Harris, 23%, then up to 30%. Then down to 18%. She has a huge crash among those who are interested in learning more about her. And in the actual polling of her percentages, she went from 9%, I'm sorry, I'm mixing up the numbers, 10% to 4% to 12% to now, where's Kamala Harris in the polls? She's cratered down to 5%. Between her flip-flops on busing, between her flip-flops on Medicare for all, between her flip-flops on care and feeding of illegal immigrants, it just doesn't go over so well, folks. Her flip-flops seem opportunistic, and people are paying attention.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now at 877-973-7425. That's 877-97-ERIC with a CK.
All right, the phones are resolved. They're active. We got a couple people. I got voicemails from callers. If you want to call into the program now, 877-97-ERIC. That's 877-973-7425 is the phone number. You can also get me on social media at EW Erickson, at Twitter, at Facebook, at Instagram. We're streaming live right now on Twitter and YouTube. But the phone number, 877-973-7425. You know who else is having a rough time besides Kamala and Elizabeth? Beto O'Rourke. He would not have said something like this on the campaign trail in Texas, where Texans are actually pretty proud of their use of the death penalty, and they should be. Beto O'Rourke now, though, after all of the hue and cry about white supremacy and white nationalism and the American continent is full of racism and the United States was founded on racism, well, listen to this.
I don't support the death penalty. I don't know that taking another life will prevent the taking of lives going forward. Understand that some people feel differently, and it is hard to argue with them after seeing the faces of the lives lost. Hard to argue with those in El Paso who feel that way when someone came in and killed 22 human beings in our community. But at the end of the day, that's my belief, but I understand those who feel differently about it.
Yeah, I'm not going to go so far as to say this is his Dukakis moment. Back in 1988, Bernard Shaw of CNN asked Michael Dukakis if he would support the death penalty if someone raped and murdered his wife, and Dukakis declined to say yes. In fact, he actually said no, and this was used against him that he would be soft on crime, wiped him out in the 1988 election. And here's Beto O'Rourke, who's been on this roll about confiscating guns and the Second Amendment and doing something to stop awful, evil people. And then when asked about the death penalty, he said, nope, I don't think we should use the death penalty even in this case. After a bunch of people were gunned down in El Paso. By the way, the shooter is on suicide watch in El Paso. Let's hope they do a more competent job than the Jeffrey Epstein crew, which, by the way, they're continuing. Man, the conspiracy theories on that Epstein guy. Did you know he signed his will 2 days before he committed suicide? Which, to me, actually bolsters the case that he did commit suicide, but just incompetence all around there. Speaking of, there's a story. Where is this? I had this over here. Y'all should see my desk. You would understand. In Atlanta, have y'all been to Atlanta? You've seen the Hyatt Hotel in Atlanta downtown that has like the UFO revolving restaurant on top of it. So apparently yesterday, last night, there was a naked man running around the hotel. I don't know if he was a guest there. The reports are still somewhat vague, but then he tried to jump. So you've got rooms at angles up high. There's some balconies you can get out on. And he tried to jump from one room to another through the balconies, and he fell to his death. I assume there was alcohol or drugs involved, but he ran through the hotel naked, tried to escape, tried to jump from one place to another, was unsuccessful and plummeted. Man. There are crazy people out there. Okay, when we come back, at the bottom of the next hour, my buddy Chris Burns is going to be in studio, actually. He is going to talk to us. He got kids. They're headed off to college. And I actually want to talk to him non-political stuff. How do you get your kids ready to go to college financially? What do you do? Credit cards. I made a terrible mistake when my first year in college. I got a credit card. A big mistake. So how do you talk to your kids about that? What do you advise them? What do you as a parent do to get your kids ready and in place to go to college? Want to talk to Chris Burns about all of these things. And we got a lot of Georgia politics, including the shenanigans in the Transportation Committee in Atlanta when we come back. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here from my flagship station, WGAU in Athens, Georgia. Glad you're joining me across the state of Georgia. The state's alcohol regulators here in Georgia, well, you may like this one, particularly those of you in college towns. New rules are announced this week. They allow customers to pick up liquor through online ordered curbside service grocery stores. Local ordinances still prohibit this, of course. I've got one down in Macon where I am. Actually, there is a drive-through liquor store. It's the only one I know of in the state, but sure enough, you can go through there and pick it up. I think there might be one in Locust Grove as well. But this is one of the states, the Department of Revenue Commissioner David Curry says this is one of the steps the Department of Revenue is taking to assist businesses with their customer service. Want to ensure that they're able to be able to keep up with the things customers want. Now, obviously, you can't place an order to pick up alcohol unless you're at least 21, but they want to be able to do this online ordering of your liquor, and you can go to the liquor store and pick it up like you're going to like a curbside service at a restaurant. Fascinating. Wow. If you want to be a part of the program, it is Erick Erickson here, and the phone number is 877-97-ERIC. That's 877-973-7425. At the bottom of this hour, my buddy Chris Burns is going to stop by. He is the head of Dynamic Money, which is sponsoring this hour anyway. Dynamic Money is a place you can go learn about investing, learn about how to manage your money better, learn about how to get a payment plan to get out of debt. It's a great program. Great company. If you need help managing your money, Dynamic Money is the place to go, and Chris Burns is the guy to see. And what I wanted to talk to him about is getting ready for college. And the kids are already starting back to college. Some are about to start back to college. And I remember my first week in college, the solicitations to get credit cards were off the chains. And I went to Mercer down in Macon, and I made the fatal mistake of getting a credit card, and it was a long time before I got out of debt and paid off that credit card. And so how do you talk to your teens, your college-age kids, and others about debt, the acquisition of debt, credit cards, and stuff? I want to talk to Chris about that. But right now, we've got a lot of political news here in the state as well. The state of Georgia is asking a federal judge to throw out the lawsuit on fetal heartbeat. The odds of the judge doing this are slim to none, but the state is making a play in trying to get rid of the lawsuit, in particular that the law isn't in effect until January. It just seems nonsensical. Now, where is my stack of stuff here? You'll have to bear with me. I was a little less prepared today, largely because we had some family stuff to deal with this morning. But here we go. Yes, attorneys representing the state told a federal judge the new anti-abortion law is constitutional and justified and asked him to dismiss the lawsuit. Filed Monday, attorneys representing the state says Georgia has an interest in protecting the life of the unborn, promoting respect for life at all stages of pregnancy, promoting maternal health and safety, and safeguarding the ethics and integrity of the medical profession. The ACLU, the Center for Reproductive Justice, and other abortion rights groups say no way. Judge Stephen Jones is hearing the case. There's a hearing scheduled for September 23rd. And the state said granting a preliminary injunction was unnecessary and premature. Now, here's what we need to know. This is the important thing, and I don't know the answer. We're going to find this out together. Stephen Jones, judge. Let's see. Because this will tell us how it goes. Stephen Jones, U.S. District Judge, Northern District of Georgia, appointed by Barack Obama. There we go. He's a Democrat. Went to UGA, is from Athens, Georgia, but yeah, he's probably going to issue an injunction. He's a Democrat. Yep, we know how this is going to be. I've always found the issue of forum shopping interesting. You know, when the state goes through redistricting in 2021, there is a Secretary of State's office in Macon, Georgia. And I think that what Republicans should do with redistricting, and frankly, they should do it with a number of other cases, is they should forum shop themselves. And when redistricting happens, you know the Democrats are going to try to file a lawsuit. So rush through, get the Republicans to file a lawsuit to overturn redistricting in Middle Georgia. Yes, let the Republicans overturn redistricting. File that lawsuit in the Middle District of Georgia. Ensure you get someone. Most of the judges there are Republicans and conservative. And, well, then you could botch the case and give a victory to redistricting. I personally think this is what Democrats do. I mean, this is what Democrats do. They forum shop. They try to get judges. They try to go to places. In the Northern District, Amy Totenberg's sister is a progressive liberal from the NPR who is not a fan of conservatives. Amy Totenberg, the judge of the Northern District, who the Democrats steered the case to against the election last year. And the voting machine, she's a progressive. She wasn't spectacularly accomplished before Barack Obama named her a judge in the Northern District, and now she's using it to try to overturn. Although the case there was not a significant win for the victors. Judge Amy Totenberg in the Northern District of Georgia ruled last week that Georgia has to get rid of its existing voting machines. But she also ruled that she would not get rid of them for the upcoming municipal elections around the state. They could still be used. What the opponents of the machines wanted was to go to paper ballots. And she says, nope, we're not going to go to paper ballots. There's not enough time. Keep the existing machines. And then, by the way, the new machines are coming and they have paper ballots. Well, there's a new complaint out by progressive activists to demand that Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, review the machines yet again and decertify, recertify, complicate the process to getting the new machines. This is all about the Democratic desire for paper ballots. It's a lot easier to steal an election with paper ballots. You know who is harmed by paper ballots? Senior citizens and the disabled. The paper ballots Georgia uses are Scantron machines where you fill in a little bubble. You got arthritis? Hard for you to hold the pen because you're disabled? Guess what? It's real hard for you to fill in the bubble. But you can touch the screen. If it's hard for you to see, you can see the screen. And you get a paper receipt of how you voted. But that's not good enough for the Democrats. They want to go back to the paper balloting. Now, one of the reasons they want to go back to the paper balloting has nothing to do with stealing the election. I know how your conservative mind works because mine works the same way. It actually has nothing to do with stealing the vote, stuffing the ballot box. Although I got to tell you, as a young guy in Georgia politics, when I got to college, got involved in the college Republicans, the Democrats in Fulton County were notorious for obstructing Republicans trying to follow the ballot boxes to the Board of Elections in Fulton County. I remember one time you had a bunch of people going from a highly contested precinct with their ballots to the Fulton County Board of Elections, and a garbage truck, mysteriously in the middle of the night pulls out and blocks the path of the Republicans. And nobody knows what happened along the way. Maybe ballots were taken out and new ballots put in their place. We don't know. Voting fraud does happen. It is not systemic, no, but you cannot deny that voting fraud happens. Even Democrats tend to admit that voter fraud happens. Look at Chicago. It is widely now considered to be true that Richard Nixon actually won the 1960 election, but voter fraud in Chicago caused him to lose to John F. Kennedy. And voter fraud in New Orleans as well potentially caused him to lose. And in parts of Texas, that there are plenty of signs of it. It's not systemic, but we shouldn't deny that voter fraud happens. Any more than we should deny there are isolated instances of voter suppression on the right and the left. You have the new Black Panthers show up at a polling location to intimidate people. You absolutely do. You have random phone calls that go out and remind people that the election is next week when it's really this week. Those are real stories. Those things really do happen. They are isolated. They are not coordinated. But there are also people who try to vote multiple times. There are people who do try to rig the absentee ballot game. There are people who do try to stuff ballots. We shouldn't deny that either. We shouldn't make it more than it is. But you know someone who's in complete denial? This person.
First of all, voter fraud is a myth. It does not exist. People aren't putting on, fake mustaches trying to vote twice. But voter suppression is real. We know that voter ID laws seem perfectly normal. But if you lived in Alabama when they passed their voter ID law, they also shut down 2/3, I believe, of the organizations of the DMVs in black communities so that the very people who needed those IDs would not be able to get them. If you live in Indiana, where they moved your polling place in Hamilton County outside of the bounds of the city, if you didn't have a car, you couldn't get to vote. And so what we have to recognize is that, again, these laws seem very basic, but the application and the implication is that your vote doesn't matter. And that's why fairfight2020.org is designed to go beyond registration.
That's right. Stacey Abrams is continuing her media blitz for her organization, the media treating her as a conquering hero, and yet here she is denying that voter fraud is a thing.
First of all, voter fraud is a myth. It does not exist.
That is garbage. That is absolute a lie. And she should be ashamed, and she should know better. Voter fraud does exist. There have been numerous cases documented around this country of people trying to steal the vote. There have been numerous, my goodness, Louisiana for the longest time was a textbook history in how to steal elections. It happened here in Georgia as well for a number of years. Is it systemic? No. Is it an epidemic? No. Does it happen? Yes. And for her to say otherwise is an absolute lie. And this is the dichotomy of what we have now. A lot of Republicans say there's no such thing as voter suppression and voter fraud is everything, and that's not true. And Democrats, led by Stacey Abrams now, say voter fraud is a myth and it's all about voter suppression, and that too is a lie. For example, the things she documents in Alabama, the Department of Motor Vehicles offices being closed down, oftentimes those are, and it's, by the way, it wasn't as widespread as what she claims, but it is often local governments shutting them down because they don't have the money to fund them. And those local governments are Democratic governments. Look in South Georgia. In South Georgia, you'll remember it was a very big story in the 2018 election. One of the counties down in South Georgia, which South Georgia county was it now? I can't remember. They wanted to shut down polling precincts because they were not ADA compliant. And the Democrats and the ACLU, but I repeat myself, they came up with this elaborate conspiracy where the consultant who recommended shutting down precincts had been a guy picked by Brian Kemp, and it was done to steal the election. This was the Democratic narrative. The reality is that the polling precincts in this county were not in good shape. The federal government insisted they needed to be ADA compliant. The county did not have the money to bring them up to ADA compliance, and so they needed to shut down some of the precincts in order to save money so that they could then rebuild those precincts. It was not a permanent shutdown. It was not a permanent consolidation. You would never know that from the press at the time. What you also would not know is that the precincts that were going to be shut down in this county were precincts that were won by Donald Trump. They were the Republican precincts. They weren't actually the Democratic precincts that were going to be hurt. All of the precincts that went for Hillary Clinton were the precincts that would remain open. It was the precincts that went for Donald Trump. They were the minority of precincts, by the way. Hillary Clinton won the county. She was Democrat. And the Democrats are in control of that county. And Donald Trump's precincts, they were the minority. You would never know that from the press coverage. You would never know that from the moaning from Democrats that Brian Kemp was trying to steal the election in this county. It wasn't true in any way, shape, or form. And you never heard that coverage from the media. And yet that was the reality. I writing at theresurgent.com, I wrote about it frequently. And when I encountered reporters, some of whom I knew who were asking about this case, they were stunned. And I kept saying, they didn't want to believe me, obviously. Well, you're a partisan. You would say these things. It's like you could look at the data yourself. And I remember going to a meeting where I knew I was going to encounter some reporters, a couple of whom were friends of mine from national outlets, and I took the data with me so they could see it. Because naturally, I knew the story was going to come up. They wanted to talk about the Georgia election. They wanted to talk about Stacey Abrams' claims. This was going to be one of the claims. So you can see the data for yourself. This is a county that is a Democrat county. It is run by Democrats. The Board of Election is presided over by Democrats, and the precincts they're closing are the ones that Donald Trump won. The precincts that are Democratic precincts, they're the ones staying open. They were stunned. They never heard this. This was new to them. And then the story went away. They decided not to do it. They walked it back. They decided to wait until after the election. By the way, they're still going forward with it. They just waited until after the election. And now suddenly it's no longer a story. The Abrams campaign, if nothing else, has been very, very good at running a PR campaign that feeds grievance and nurses white guilt in the media. It's worked very well for them. To go on national TV, though, she was on CBS, to go on national TV and say voter fraud is a myth, is as ridiculous as a Republican going in saying voter suppression is a myth. Both of them are real. Neither of them are significant. Both of them should be fought. But let's not pretend people aren't trying to steal the vote out there. Democrats have tried and Republicans have tried, and it's wrong. And you know a great way to stamp out voter fraud? Photo ID, the thing the Democrats hate, and yet it works.
Politics, news, religion. Erick Erickson talks about all the things you're not supposed to talk about every weekday. And some cooking, too.
At the bottom of the hour, how do you get your kids prepared for college financially? Not like when their baby starts a savings account, but your kids are teenagers. I've got a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and no, we actually don't have a college fund for them. But how do you get them prepared for college? How do you talk to them about the credit card temptations? At the bottom of the hour, my buddy Chris Burns is going to stop by to talk to us about it. Randomly now, a Georgia man in Indiana has been charged with littering. I love the story. This pushes all the right dad buttons for me. Georgia man charged with littering in Indiana. You're thinking, how on earth do you charge somebody with littering? Well, an Indiana State Patrol was driving down the interstate, and what should slam into his windshield? A poop-filled dirty diaper. Yes. Apparently, Mom changed the dirty diaper and they threw it out the car window and it hit the state trooper they didn't realize was behind them. So they were only charged with littering, thankfully. So they'll have a light fine. But yes, yeah. Meanwhile, President Trump continues to speak out on the Greenland issue. So a buddy of mine actually photoshopped. It was a hilarious picture of Greenland, and he photoshopped the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. If you've ever been out to Las Vegas, there's just standing off by itself is the Trump Hotel, and it's got gold glass tint. It's kind of gaudy building. A buddy of mine actually says it's his favorite hotel to stay in Las Vegas because the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas doesn't have casinos in it. It doesn't have casinos in it because Donald Trump wanted a hotel in Las Vegas. There wasn't available land, so he bought land from Steve Wynn, the Wynn Casinos. And Wynn made him agree that he would not put casinos in the building that could compete with Wynn. So if you go to the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, you can walk through the lobby without having to smell like cigarette smoke and cigars because there isn't anybody sitting down there smoking in the lobby area gambling. And he loves it. I know several people long before Donald Trump, and these aren't really Trump fans. In fact, one of them is a little bit skittish about staying there now because he doesn't like the president, but he loves to stay there because he's not going to smell like cigarettes and that he doesn't gamble. He goes to Las Vegas for other things, and he kind of likes that. So there you have it. Now, I want to turn to some of the other Georgia news that you need to know. This is actually an Atlanta story, and so I realize our audience here is from the North Georgia mountains to the Florida line and from the Chattahoochee all the way over to the Atlantic coast. We got stations around the state, but we don't have anybody in Atlanta. But you do need to know about this story, even though it doesn't affect you directly. It affects the transit in Atlanta. There is a group called the ATL. It is the Atlanta Transit Authority, essentially, and it's made up of state representatives, state senators, commissioners, and mayors who kind of they elect people to represent their areas in the Transit Authority in Atlanta. And consistently over the years, this group has allowed meetings by phone. They've allowed votes by phone because it's very hard to get that number of people present. So they've always allowed votes by phone. Last October, they had a couple of commissioners there, and they all agreed to allow their votes by phone. Well, they met yesterday because they picked someone for one of the seats. That person has had to step down because they've taken a job with MARTA. They needed a replacement, and 4 people couldn't be there. One was in London, one was in the ICU with a relative, and 2 others were out of town on business. So they called in by phone to be a part of the meeting and vote. And the same Democrats who agreed to take phone votes in October refused to take phone votes last night. The reason is because the Republicans and Democrats are divided on who should be in this new seat. And all the Republicans have rallied around one person, and all the Democrats and one Republican have rallied behind someone else, the former chair of MARTA. Well, the Democrats and the one Republican, Brandon Beach, who's running for Congress in the 6th, they got together and refused to allow phone votes for the first time last night. First time this group has ever refused to allow phone votes, essentially disenfranchising 10% of the population of Atlanta because they changed the rules. So the Republicans in the committee, you had to have a 15-member quorum, they got up and walked out to deny a quorum, to deny a vote to this organization. And so that seat remains empty. But this is the Democrats and one Republican, Brandon Beach, denying 10% of the Atlanta metro population a right to vote on this committee. The Democrats who say count every vote refused to count every vote. Erickson here on the Erick Erickson Show. If you would like to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC. That's 877-973-7425. Phone lines actually are open now. We got the phone situation worked out. Joining me in studio, my buddy Chris Burns. How are you? See, too rich for my blood. Yeah. Yes, we do. We got a lot to work on. At some point, I got to sit down with you and actually have serious discussions about this stuff. In the meantime, so I typically, by the way, just randomly, I tend to stay at the Palazzo by the Venetian. And the reason that I tend to stay there is because as long as I've been with CNN and then with Fox, I was having to go out there for stuff. I got to know the security people. And you would be amazed the number of times I've been recognized, harassed by people in that hotel and area. So I like to stay where I know the security people. Yes. All right, so let's talk about college and kids, because I will never forget my freshman year of college. Walking at Mercer, and walking in to go pick up class schedules and stuff. There was a Citibank guy, there was a Chase guy. There was, at the time, it was Trust Company, not SunTrust. There was a Trust Company guy, and there were several others. Everyone, and an Amex, of all things, an Amex, all trying to lure me into their credit cards. And I got a Citibank card, which I still have, actually. Racked up some serious debt on it in college and took forever to pay it off, which I eventually did. But it is a real temptation for college students.